Welcome to Breaking History. My name is Sean Morgan. I'm a host of the Sean Morgan Report on AMP News. I'm here with Matthew Ehret, the editor of the Canadian Patriot Review. And Matt, we were talking earlier about the Meta Showcase, where Mark Zuckerberg showcased the latest VR headset and the gaming, and then also these new Ray-Ban glasses that show the augmented reality, what they tried to do with Google Glass a decade ago. Now you can just live stream your life 24/7. They're really rolling out this technocracy quite quickly now because Apple's launching their VR headsets for $3,500 in January. So what are the roots of this technocracy, and where do you see it headed in the near term?
Yeah, Sean, and I'm glad we were able to finally get on today. Well, it's going to be a short show, 30 minutes, but I'm sure we'll get through a lot. That's a great way to start. And indeed, I just watched the same video too. The idea is to just do what Yuval Harari had put forth in one of his World Economic Forum sermons not that long ago. I think most people have seen his remarks about what do we do with the new global useless class who are meaningless and worthless, drugs and video games. And there has been a longstanding effort going back well over a century ago to try to bring about a society which would be complacent in illusions, that would not be able to differentiate between the dream state and the waking state. And this actually was something tackled by Plato when you go to read his Protagoras dialogues from 2,300 years ago. There's deep analysis about, like, how do you really know if you're awake or if you're dreaming? Now, Plato was somebody who was working through his academy, was trying to organize philosopher kings. He was organizing generals against the cults, the mystery cults of Persia, of Babylon, which had contaminated Greece in those days. And we're basically trying to undo the reforms of great leaders like Solon, the lawgiver, who had freed the debt slaves, brought Greece ancient Greece out of its dark age, whereby 90% of the population in Greece was enslaved as if you were in debt, you had to become a slave to somebody else. That was 90% of the population. They had forgotten their literature. They had forgotten their history. And this is where Plato in the Republic, no, sorry, in the Timaeus dialogue, sorry, recounts the story of Solon visiting the Egyptians, a temple of Ammon in Egypt, where the Egyptians say, well, look, you Greeks are like children. You've had so much greatness behind you in the past, and every time there's a crisis, floods or anything, your records are wiped away and you go back to being like a childlike state. And Solon takes this knowledge of natural law, of various things, and brings it back to become the crisis manager who overcomes the crisis, declares war on the oligarchs, frees the people, eliminates the debts, and ushers in a Renaissance period where some of the greatest works of tragedy, of comedy, of everything, the Aeschylus works, Sophocles, Eratosthenes, emerged out of the cultural reforms of liberty put forth by Solon. And this was collapsing back into a dark age. And Greece was becoming more of an empire again under the sophists, the people who could make the false seem true and make the people give up their liberty for security. And this is where Greece became an empire. It lost its moral fitness to survive. This is what the founding fathers of America were studying when they were looking at how did Greece lose its moral fitness? How did Rome lose its status as a republic to become an empire with the murder of Cicero, just like Greece had the murder of Socrates earlier? But the issue of the oligarchy, and Benjamin Franklin, many of the founding fathers understood the nature of oligarchical systems, the mind wars that we're all navigating through very well. And they, much better than a lot of people in today's world, unfortunately, with all of our technology, and they understood that the oligarchy needs to keep the illusion of reality, but they need to keep us as far removed intellectually and emotionally from the real consequences of our actions and our thoughts as possible. So with the emergence of the technocracy, the Matrix, exactly, yeah, like that's a new 20th century expression of Plato's cave, and the Wachowski brothers see that the oligarchy will read Plato to figure out how can they best have a formula for controls, whereas Plato is actually warning people how the operation and how the traps work. So he's trying to help people get out of the cave where all people believe in is the shadows on the cave wall, with his famous allegory from Book 7 of the Republic the allegory of the cave, right? Where you have the oligarchical technocrats represented by the puppet masters casting shadows on the cave wall from a fire behind them. And these shadow controllers are not themselves masters. They're beholden to a higher power. But the masses are born with their necks shackled, so that all they know in their life is the sounds emitted by the puppet masters and the shadows, not reality. And one person gets out of the cave.
Isn't it amazing, though, that a few thousand years later, now we've got these Ray-Ban augmented glasses that are being showcased and literally casting shadows so that people can't distinguish falsity from reality? I mean, this is why history is so important, because that allegory is hyper relevant at this very moment.
Oh yeah, and part of this involves as well the issue of mind drugs. You know, like the this is what Timothy Leary called it, but basically the new culture, the new spirituality that will involve a rehabilitated Eleusinian drug culture. Because back in the ancient times, you had psychedelic operations, psychedelic practices as part of the mystery rites of initiation. You had that with the mysteries of Eleusis. You had that with the cult of Apollo at Delphi, which was an organizing cult where all of the generals and kings of the ancient world would pay homage, would give a lot of booty of gold and everything to have the priests tell them what this priestess at Delphi was muttering. This girl was stoned high as a kite. Now they actually have discovered that at that, they know where the location is of the cult of Apollo at Delphi, and there's a hallucinogenic mist that even to this day comes through the crevices. So they had her positioned over this mist that made her like super, super, super high. And that's the way that you would go through this type of thing in the ancient times to de-pattern your mind. It was a useful way to create hallucinations that could then be defined for you what the hallucinations mean from your subconscious, right? By a master priest class that would then reshape your identity so that you would become either a more loyal slave, happy with your slavery, or somebody who would be like more of a Yuval Harari type, an upper level manager who would also lose their humanity in the process of not differentiating between fiction and truth. So now,
the mind control is to purposefully induce insanity and then mold the restructuring of the reality according to how the masters want.
Yes, and so they've used new technologies to take these this old knowledge and popularize it, and it's taken them some time, right, over the past 70, 80 years. But this is when you hear Yuval Harari talking about drugs and video games. He's talking about this immersion into this amplified reality that Facebook is. But what is also the drugs, right? The new psychedelics that are being normalized all across British Columbia and Toronto, in Canada as well as many states. It's now legal. They first legalized weed, saying it's for medical reasons, but it was never for just medical reasons. The whole idea was to use that as a precedent to expand the limit, like they do for everything, euthanasia, you name it. Like, oh, we just want to help people who are suffering and who have terminal illnesses end their suffering, and they play your heartstrings. And as soon as you say yes to a little bit of this, all of a sudden the idea is to basically push it to the point that you could have a kid who's a mature child with depression who can now all of a sudden access euthanasia because the idea of the sacredness of life doesn't mean much in a technocracy where we're all just a bag of flesh and atoms, where there's no soul, nothing sacred, no justice. So that's
always been part of the cult's MO has been to get people to, it's a suicide cult, to get people to get rid of themselves. So we have to be careful when that rears its head in places like Canada and Europe and so forth with the euthanasia. But something that came to mind that I don't want to gloss over is what I've noticed with a lot of the normies or the people who really latch on to the propaganda. The type of personality that they have is they really attach to the popular culture, like Disney movies, Harry Potter, Marvel, superhero things, and then it's hard for them to distinguish reality from the fantasy. And then when you overlay like a media complex induced narrative of Putin or Trump being the villain, and then they are part of the group of the resistance who's going to defeat the villain by putting the Ukraine symbol in your social media profile, by becoming the Trump hater and persecuting Trump and all his supporters. I've noticed in a lot of these Twitter profiles and Twitter rantings of these people who are really suggestible, is they use a lot of these narrative metaphors and characters from Disney, Marvel, Harry Potter. Have you noticed that? And do you think that that's significant in the mind control?
That's a strong observation. And yeah, my wife, that brought an association in my brain. My wife just showed me this commercial, a Diesel commercial, the clothing brand. And yeah, it's super politicized, and it's got like this androgynous wannabe cool person walking on some wall indicating, the border wall. And just making these like dirty face, like no, and does something weird with his hand and busts open the wall and lets people come in, and it's like great, we're all loving each other. Now he's got a tattoo on his back of the Black Sun of the Occult. Now there are obviously the Black Sun of the Occult is a Nazi Thule Society hardcore SS killer logo indicating the old pagan Viking mythos that was being revived with the runes and all of this shit. Sorry for the language, within the Nazi high command, and it is part of the symbolism in today's Azov battalion, Idar battalions that are fighting the Russians today in Ukraine, and the Black Sun, which also indicates an ancient. And my wife is actually producing a documentary. We're going to go through this in some greater detail. But this is something that was very prevalent in the ancient times of ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient Babylon, was this symbology, indicating sort of a Luciferian opposite sun, right? A darkness that is an opposing force that is masquerading in different gods and deities of Horus and Apollo. And Apollo is just a precursor for Lucifer later on. But it's all the same deity with the same ultimate attributes of evil being good that we have to induct ourselves into to shed our belief that there is such a thing as morality and justice and God and the goodness that has to be shed. So, but this is the thing, right? Like you were saying, they're bringing this into the pop culture. People see these symbols and they don't realize, no, this is actually hardcore Nazism, but with this romantic image that you're fighting against the evil Trump and the Trump subhuman minions that you have to do battle with. And you're right. I think these character types, these archetypes are embedded in a lot of these brain dead shows on Amazon Prime and Netflix. Yeah, that's a good point.
So you actually talked to me before the show a little bit about the roots of the technocracy. So Elon Musk and his lineage, I mean, I see him more as a foil to Mark Zuckerberg, like a competing faction that wants to do positive technology. But Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, who's passed away now, but these are the new kind of almost religious figures who are unveiling the secrets of the universe and the new creations that only the elite could possibly have access to, and then they endow this magic to the masses if they're willing to line up and pay the fee. So what are the roots of this?
That's a good point too. Yeah. Well, the first up, I'll just say on the issue of Meta, there's a Colonel Frank Burns who is a major player within within the Esalen Institute and the entire New Age parapsychology drug culture that infused itself into the military with the various 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th PSYOP battalion, PSYOP groups that really emerged under the CIA's Office of Policy Coordination of Allen Dulles. And a lot of the leading figures who were processed through it and became leaders of these PSYOP groups involved people like Colonel John Alexander, somebody who was directly affiliated with Anton LaVey, with Michael Aquino. Michael Aquino himself was a high-level killer in Vietnam, and that was sort of like a rite of initiation for a lot of these people. Now, he became Colonel Michael Aquino, became also the head of the Temple of Set. He was the second in command of Anton LaVey, and he worked very closely with John Alexander, who himself also was a leading figure carrying out war crimes in Vietnam, and became an occult figure, working on the art of illusion, the art of the mental wars and the battle of the mind of the people, right? And this brought in drugs, parapsychology into Fort Bragg. You had things like the Men Who Stare at Goats, where they tried to do things like look at a goat to make its head explode, try to do astral projection, kill a target 1,000 miles away with your brain. But they also brought in electromagnetic warfare as well. That was a big thing of what they were doing. Part of it also involved ARPANET. And ARPANET was the creation of it was a prototype for the modern internet system. One of the first projects overseen by Colonel Frank Burns, who was part of this thing, was called Meta. It was the first social networking system in the world, set up in 1981. And they called it Meta. So they've always been waiting to get it back to Meta. And so they needed a cardboard cutout, like you pointed out, like a random Harvard kid with low-level morality and intellect who would just be a cardboard cutout, like Bill Gates was, right? To be the person who would embody, but not be really much of anything. It could have been anybody. Same thing in my assessment, the transhumanist Elon Musk as well, who wants to have his new social credit score system tied to his X platform that he wants to have as the basis of half the world's currency, of a digital economy tied to your Tesla cars that could be shut off remotely, where people are also getting brain implants, where you could drive your car with a brain implant. So Elon Musk is an ideological transhumanist, and ultimately, I think, the same type of personality type, who's playing, as you said, a foil to Bezos, arguing over who's got the best phallic-looking spaceship for billionaires, right? To go and gamble in casinos on the moon or something. So all that to say, the ideological underpinnings of this, I wrote an essay published with Whitney Webb's website a little while ago, going through the cybernetics origins of transhumanism. And so when you look at the transhumanists, these were all the eugenicists of the 20s, 30s, 40s. People like Julian Huxley is the guy who founded the term transhumanism back in 1954. Julian Huxley was himself the co-founder of UNESCO, the founder of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in 1947. His counterpart in America was Lawrence Rockefeller, who was setting up the American Union for the Conservation of Nature. Lawrence Rockefeller was also overseeing the growth of the Human Potential Movement, the Esalen Institute, all of this stuff that was bringing in, the new age into our culture, especially focusing on the business class, the business elite, who would get processed in these spa resort seminar sessions of brainwashing in the 60s and 70s in Esalen, overseen by these social engineers. And that would become the harbingers of the third wave, what Alvin Toffler called the third wave. The first wave being the agricultural revolution, the second wave being the industrial revolution of the 18th and 19th century. And now he's saying the third wave, which is basically the fourth industrial revolution, another way of calling it, is the age where computers become self-aware and do all of our work for us. And we get a new useless class of people who don't have the skills and can't transition to the new software-based society, the information economy. Now, they've added to that, saying that, that by 2050 or 2045, whatever, it's meaningless, because they're projecting their imaginary beliefs onto the world, because the oligarchy also doesn't believe in reality necessarily. They do a lot of projection, that they have these mystical powers, but they say that by 2050, the computer systems will become self-aware. That's called the singularity. And at that point, like Elon Musk says, if we haven't merged with machines, we're going to go extinct like the dinosaurs that went extinct when a new superior life form presented itself in the form of mammals. So it's like merge or go extinct, right? So you have a choice. Go Terminator mode, fight the machines, and go Amish and like abandon technology. That's one choice. Or the other choice is integrate, right? Just merge with them, embrace this new reality.
Can't beat them, join them. I have a question about that. So there are many examples where the cult, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, they seem to be communicating with something or some group of demons or Satan on the other side. And then they have these channels and these different rituals to get knowledge, like even schematics of rockets and things like that. And so are they getting this narrative from their deity?
No.
That
No, I
like
thought about that.
where are they getting the idea?
Yeah.
Is
I'll
it a
tell you.
good idea? Is it logical that
Yeah.
computers will become self-aware, or is this the idea they're getting? Go ahead.
No, it's a good question. Isaac Newton was an occult alchemist, numerologist looking for the philosopher's stone. He never did any science. The old now, does that mean every single thing scientific discovery attributed to this figure, Isaac Newton, who was the warden of the Bank of England, right? He was the warden of the mint. He was a sociopathic killer, killed everybody who forged coins, right? You didn't have to kill him, but he killed everybody. He loved it, and he would watch. He was a sicko. But so were his discoveries the effects of his occult identity? No. He stole his discoveries. He had a grouping of people like Samuel Clark, Robert Hooke, who were high level initiates within the Rosicrucian order. These were people who were also, but they were a little bit more self-aware. They were part of the Royal Society, which itself emerged out of Rosicrucianism. It was basically just to practice black magic. It wasn't for science. But what they would do as a team is they would look for real scientists who were actually making pioneering discoveries, like a Leibniz, who was discovering the calculus, or like a Johannes Kepler in Germany, who was discovering the laws of planetary motion, as well as the telescope. Like his work on optics was the groundwork for the telescope, with a grouping of great scientists in the Netherlands. And what would happen is they would try to, if you can't destroy new discoveries, which is their first preferred option, is just destroy them, right? Make sure no discoveries happen. If you can't do that, at the very least, try to co-opt the discovery and say it came out of you interpret the cause of what made the discovery possible. So they create like an Isaac Newton type of synthetic character who says, apples fall on my heads and I make discoveries. I only use my senses. And if you want to make discoveries and be a great scientist like me, says Newton in his Principia Mathematica, you just hypotheses no flamingo. Don't make hypotheses. Don't use your mind. Just use your senses, and then extrapolate from your senses and make a law. That doesn't work. If you do that, you will never make a discovery. You will only make arbitrary models that have no bearing in reality and cannot be tested. Kind of like black holes, string theory. All of this crap came out of pseudo-Newtonians utilizing that method of just make-believe using already existent math that has no bearing on reality, and creates
almost like a master-batory exercise in nonsense, just making things that seem to fit together.
It's modern scholasticism. Back in the 12th, 13th century, you would have these absurd debates inside of like the Padua University in Italy, where all of these Aristotelians were all debating how many angels could dance on the pinhead of a needle. And they would have serious debates that would go on for months. And it's the sort of same thing today. You hear some of the debates about like, do we have 13 dimensions in the universe, or do we have like 80 dimensions in our multiverse? And it's like, wait a minute, whoever said there's a multiverse? Why are we all like agreeing on this absurdity that there must be other dimensions and multiverses without first even having discovered anything about our own? You're all just taking doctrines that you've not thought about, but you've gotten PhDs on because you're rewarded by a priest class called the peer review system to have a certain language and adopt certain assumptions about the universe and everything else, that then rewards you by getting you published, giving you grants, getting you positions, and then it becomes a self-feeding sort of monster. So I think that all of the good discoveries that do tend to happen, it's usually, including in our modern age, they're things that were stolen by actual scientists and then repackaged under a more occult garb.
So that's a good answer for where do the elite get their ideas? They steal them from us. But what about the idea that computers or technology, AI, is going to become self-aware and become a conscious master being? Do you think they got that idea themselves? Or, like I said, is this part of their spiritual channeling thing that they do, where they seem to be getting information from the other side, from demons, from Satan, or from their deity, whatever you want to call it.
They are evil,
Like-
and they do worship Satan. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Absolutely. Now, the idea that computers will ever become self-aware is a hoax. It's a fallacy. It's not going to happen. It can't happen because there are certain things that computers don't have access. Computers only operate based on deductive or inductive logical reasoning skills. So you could take information, put it into a computer as far as data, and the computer will read the data according to certain algorithms. But who programs the algorithms? And it can make extrapolations of the data into something general.
So this could be like the Wizard of Oz, where you have George Soros, or whoever the deep state wants to choose as a representative. I'm just picking a random person. And then they program the AI that's super powerful. And then the AI says, I'm conscious and I'm making my own decisions and I'm smarter than all of you. And you guys need to just obey and follow my lead because I'm God now on earth, you know? So is this a very convenient narrative for them to endow technology with this divinity?
Yeah, and it gets you the same effect. It's all about the effect. That's what the effect was for the high priests of the cult of Delphi. You know, you have this blubbering woman who's a conduit for the gods, the god of Apollo, that was talking to humans through her random utterings because she's high as hell. She doesn't know what's going on. But now the tea leaf readers, you know, the same thing, or the astrologers who would read the geometries of the planetary systems and induce meaning, deities that were then speaking or communicating to the wise, the initiates who could read the tea leaves, or the augurs of ancient Roman Empire who would cut bird bellies open, read where the guts spilled, right? Or the runes, those pagan priesthoods and druids who would read the runes where they fell and would tell the kings, their generals, where to go to war, where to make peace with. It's kind of like that, but now all of a sudden you have these these self-aware machines telling us what to do because they're so wise, and only the oracles who are like Yuval Harari-esque could interpret what they want us to do from the higher realm, or aliens. You know, you got a lot of these same agencies, like I mentioned, Colonel John Alexander, Michael Aquino. There are also people who have been promoting the whole alien psyop as well since the days of H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds broadcast, overseen by Lawrence Rockefeller, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation in the 1930s. Which was trying to see what would people do if they were told there was a Martian attack? Would we all fall into alignment to protect ourselves under a world government? And so if aliens have been here as well, interfacing with an elite through like Roswell or other dimensions, and what are you going to do as a lowly plebe? You going to fight them? Like they're a multidimensional alien being that's working with the oligarchy. There's nothing you could do. So there's, you know, whether it's the aliens, whether it's the AI machines, they're just looking for excuses to get us to shut ourselves down, become superstitious, and to give up our liberty in order to have some sense of stability in a world of chaos.
You know, we'll run out of time, but I want to end on the idea that you described earlier, how in ancient Greece, you know, they lost their knowledge, they became debt slaves. And when you said 90% of the population became debt slaves, I thought of the modern world where 90% of the people are debt slaves. And then you talked about how there was a character who kind of set the people free and then ushered in a renaissance of culture. And I have to say, I think about that we're humanity in the United States and every nation, but specifically I'm thinking about Trump, and I'm thinking about the opportunity for a jubilee, for a reset of our financial system, to free the debt slaves and to usher in a renaissance. You know, we're really at the cusp of either washing away all of our knowledge and sending people into deeper ignorance, or set people free and usher in that renaissance. Aren't we at that sort of crossroads? And we don't have much time for you to elaborate on that, but can you tell us where can people find your work and your documentaries?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're putting out new documentaries right now. We're just unleashing a series on the debunking the overpopulation myth. The first one has just been released this week. My wife wrote it and narrated it. That people can go to risingtidefoundation.net or go to canadianpatriot.org. We're also doing something on the UFO psyop as well, going back to ancient times and the revival of a lot of these ancient pagan cults and mystery religions with the whole UFO story. So that's another series of videos we're going to be unleashing starting next week. So people can check all that stuff out on those websites.
Well, I have a suggestion for you guys' next documentary, The Hoax of the AI Consciousness. I mean, that's a big narrative that's been seeded. And I think all of us are kind of afraid of Frankenstein's monster and what it's going to do. And yet you're saying, just like the climate change hoax and UFO hoax and all the other hoaxes, we don't need to be in fear. So there's some fallacies there to debunk. Looking forward to you and your wife's continued work on all of these great things. We're gonna just pause at the end of the show here now and just talk about one of the sponsors. So if you need to go, Matt, that's okay. I'm just going to talk about the final sponsor.
No, let's hear the sponsors.
Well, we're just going to play a quick video. I'm going to turn off my my camera for a second and play the video and talk about this. Just one moment. So basically, we have a new sponsor here that I'm not familiar with, but I'm very fascinated by it. It's about snoring, keeping you or your loved one up at night. There's Zipa. It's a solution here. It's the only anti-snoring consumer mouthpiece with an FDA-approved clinical study behind it. A staggering 91% success rate proves its effectiveness. There's no other snoring mouthpiece that can boast these kinds of results. So it has an innovative design. Its stabilizing band and self-molding technology promises a custom fit. And with 2 distinct device designs to choose from, there's something for everyone. So this is really interesting here. They have a 90-day refund policy here. They have a price of $29.95 to $129.95, depending on what you go for. So it's guaranteed or your money back. But you don't have to take our word for it. The most compelling testimonials come from satisfied customers. So you can check that out. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv/Zipa, and we can spell that out for you. It's ZYPPAH. We're going to put a link in the description below. You can get 5% off. So check that out. I know it's an important one for people who have those issues. So we'll just turn my camera back on here. Matt, thanks so much for talking about this important subject. I learned so much from you, and your work is so important right now. You're providing that counter narrative to the deep state, and you're waking people up, including myself. I thought I was awake until I talked to you, and I'm going to a whole other level of awareness with our dialogue. So thank you, Matt, for your work.
Oh, dude, you made my day. All right, thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.
God bless, Matt. We'll see you next time, everybody.
God bless.
See if I can actually